The sun was setting over the quiet, tree-lined streets of Willow Creek, an upscale suburban neighborhood in Texas. The houses were large, with perfectly manicured lawns and pristine white picket fences. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to know everyone else, and where the Homeowners Association, HOA, ruled with an iron fist. Sarah had moved here just 2 weeks ago, hoping to give her daughter, Lily, a better life. At 8 years old, Lily was full of life and curiosity, but her cerebral palsy meant she relied on a wheelchair to get around. Sarah, a single mother, had worked tirelessly to save enough money for this move. She wanted Lily to grow up in a safe, welcoming community. But as she unpacked the last box in their new home, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first sign of trouble came on their third day in the neighborhood. Sarah had installed a small wheelchair ramp at the front of their house. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple, sturdy structure to help Lily get in and out of the house independently. She hadn't thought much about it. After all, it was a necessity. But that afternoon, as she was helping Lily practice rolling up and down the ramp, a sharp voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, who approved this?" Sarah turned to see a woman striding toward them. She was in her late 40s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a designer handbag dangling from her arm. Her face was pinched in disapproval, and her eyes were fixed on the ramp like it was an eyesore. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, stepping in front of Lily protectively. "The ramp," the woman said, gesturing sharply. "You can't just build something like that without HOA approval. It's against the rules." Sarah forced a polite smile. "Oh, I didn't realize. I'll look into getting approval right away. It's just that my daughter—" "I don't care why you did it," the woman interrupted, her voice dripping with disdain. "Rules are rules. You have 48 hours to remove it, or you'll be fined $500 a day." Before Sarah could respond, the woman turned on her heel and marched away. Lily, who had been watching the exchange with wide eyes, tugged on Sarah's sleeve. "Mommy, is she mad at us?" Sarah knelt down, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "No, sweetheart. She's just very serious about rules. Don't worry, okay? Mommy will handle it." But as the days passed, it became clear that handling it wouldn't be easy. Sarah submitted the necessary paperwork to the HOA, but the approval process was slow. Meanwhile, the woman, whose name she learned was Karen, kept showing up. Every time Sarah stepped outside, Karen seemed to be there, watching her with a cold, calculating gaze. One evening, as Sarah was putting Lily to bed, her phone buzzed with a new email. It was from the HOA. "Dear Ms. Thompson, your request for a wheelchair ramp has been denied. The structure does not comply with the aesthetic standards of our community. Please remove it immediately to avoid further penalties." Sarah stared at the screen, her heart sinking. She thought about Lily, who had already started to gain confidence using the ramp. She thought about the countless times she'd carried her daughter up and down the stairs, her back aching from the strain. She thought about the way Lily's face lit up when she could move freely, like any other child. "No," Sarah whispered to herself. "I'm not taking it down." The next morning, she decided to take Lily to the neighborhood park. It was a beautiful day, and she wanted to give her daughter a chance to enjoy the sunshine. As they made their way down the sidewalk, Lily chattered excitedly about the butterflies she'd seen in the garden. But as they approached the park, Sarah noticed Karen standing near the entrance. She was talking to another woman, her voice loud and carrying. Completely ruined the look of the street. I mean, who does she think she is? Just building whatever she wants? It's an eyesore. Sarah's stomach churned, but she kept walking, determined not to let Karen ruin their day. As they passed, Karen turned and glared at them. "You know," Karen said loudly, "this park is for residents only, not for people who think they're above the rules." Sarah stopped, her hands tightening on Lily's wheelchair. "My daughter and I are residents," she said, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside her. Karen smirked. "Well, maybe you should act like it. That ramp of yours is an embarrassment to the neighborhood." Lily, sensing the tension, looked up at Sarah with worried eyes. "Mommy, can we go home?" Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. Of course, sweetheart. As they turned to leave, Karen called after them. And don't think I'm going to let this slide. You'll be hearing from the HOA. That night, Sarah lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She knew she was in for a fight, but she also knew she couldn't back down. This wasn't just about a ramp. It was about Lily's right to live a normal life. Little did she know the fight was about to get much, much worse. The days that followed were tense. Sarah tried to keep life as normal as possible for Lily, but the constant pressure from the HOA and Karen's relentless hostility weighed heavily on her. She had started documenting every interaction, every email, and every threat, knowing that she might need evidence if things escalated further. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Sarah decided to take Lily to the neighborhood park again. She hoped that some fresh air and playtime would help lift both their spirits. Lily had been looking forward to it all morning, her little face lighting up at the mention of the swings and the slide. As they approached the park, Sarah noticed Karen standing near the entrance, her arms crossed and her expression sour. Sarah hesitated for a moment but decided to ignore her. She wasn't going to let Karen dictate where they could or couldn't go. "Look, Lily, the swings are free," Sarah said cheerfully, pushing her daughter's wheelchair toward the playground. But before they could reach the swings, Karen stepped in front of them, blocking their path. "What do you think you're doing?" Karen demanded, her voice sharp and cutting. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We're going to the park, Karen, just like any other family in this neighborhood." Karen's eyes narrowed. "This park is for residents who follow the rules, not for people who think they can do whatever they want." Sarah felt her patience wearing thin. "Karen, I've already submitted the paperwork for the ramp. I'm waiting for approval. In the meantime, my daughter needs to be able to get in and out of the house safely. Surely you can understand that." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "I understand that you're breaking the rules, and I'm not going to stand by and let you ruin this neighborhood." Lily, sensing the tension, looked up at Sarah with wide, frightened eyes. "Mommy, I don't like this. Can we go home?" Sarah's heart ached at the fear in her daughter's voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go." But as Sarah turned the wheelchair around, Karen stepped in front of them again. "Oh no, you're not leaving yet. You need to understand that your actions have consequences." Sarah's patience snapped. "Karen, get out of our way. You're scaring my daughter." Karen's eyes gleamed with a cruel satisfaction. "Maybe she should be scared. Maybe then you'll learn to follow the rules." Before Sarah could react, Karen reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a small canister. Sarah's eyes widened in horror as she realized what it was. Pepper spray. "Karen, don't!" Sarah shouted, stepping in front of Lily's wheelchair. But Karen didn't listen. With a cold, calculated motion, she aimed the canister at Lily and pressed the button. The spray hit Lily square in the face. The little girl let out a blood-curdling scream, her hands flying to her eyes as the burning sensation overwhelmed her. Sarah dropped to her knees, her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to shield her daughter from further harm. "Lily! Oh my God, Lily!" Sarah cried, her voice breaking with panic. Karen stood frozen for a moment, the canister still in her hand, as if she couldn't believe what she had just done. But then, instead of showing remorse, she took a step back, her face twisted with a mixture of fear and defiance. She shouldn't have been here," Karen stammered, her voice shaking. "This is what happens when you break the rules." Sarah barely registered Karen's words. Her entire focus was on Lily, who was sobbing uncontrollably, her tiny body trembling with pain. "Help! Somebody! Please help!" Sarah screamed, her voice echoing through the park. A few parents who had been watching the scene from a distance rushed over, their faces pale with shock. One of them, a man in his 30s, pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "We need an ambulance at Willow Creek Park. A child's been pepper sprayed." Sarah cradled Lily in her arms, tears streaming down her face as she tried to soothe her daughter. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here. You're going to be okay." Karen, realizing the gravity of what she had done, tried to slip away, but one of the other parents blocked her path. "Oh no, you're not going anywhere," the woman said firmly. "The police are going to want to talk to you." Karen's face turned pale, and she started to protest, but no one was listening. All eyes were on Lily, who was still crying in pain, her face red and swollen from the pepper spray. Within minutes, the sound of sirens filled the air. An ambulance and a police car pulled up to the park, and paramedics rushed over to tend to Lily. "We need to flush her eyes with water," one of the paramedics said, gently guiding Sarah to step aside. Sarah watched helplessly as they worked on her daughter, her heart breaking with every sob that escaped Lily's lips. One of the police officers approached Karen, who was now sitting on a bench, her hands trembling. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions," the officer said, his tone firm but calm. Karen looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear. I didn't mean to hurt her. She was breaking the rules. I was just trying to teach her a lesson." The officer's expression hardened. "Ma'am, you just assaulted a disabled child. You're going to need to come with us." As Karen was led away in handcuffs, Sarah felt a small sense of relief, but it was overshadowed by the overwhelming fear for her daughter. The paramedics finished treating Lily and helped her into the ambulance. Sarah climbed in after her, holding her daughter's hand tightly as they sped toward the hospital. "You're going to be okay, Lily," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Mommy's here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." But as she looked down at her daughter's tear-streaked face, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that their lives had just changed forever. The fight with the HOA, the hostility from Karen, it had all led to this moment. And now, all she could do was pray that Lily would be okay. Little did she know, the incident was about to spark a firestorm that would ripple far beyond their quiet neighborhood. The hospital waiting room was sterile and quiet, the hum of fluorescent lights the only sound breaking the silence. Sarah sat in a hard plastic chair, her hands clasped tightly together as she stared at the closed door of the treatment room. Lily was inside, being examined by doctors to ensure there was no lasting damage from the pepper spray. Every second felt like an eternity. A nurse approached, her face kind but professional. "Ms. Thompson, your daughter is stable. We've flushed her eyes thoroughly, and she's resting now. The doctor will be out to speak with you shortly." Sarah nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. As she waited, her mind raced. She thought about Karen, about the cold, calculated way she had sprayed Lily. She thought about the HOA, about the countless emails and threats she'd received over the ramp. And she thought about Lily, her sweet, innocent daughter, who had done nothing wrong but exist in a world that seemed determined to make life harder for her. When the doctor finally emerged, Sarah stood up so quickly she felt dizzy. "How is she?" The doctor, a middle-aged man with a gentle demeanor, gave her a reassuring smile. "Lily is going to be okay. Her eyes are irritated, but there's no permanent damage. We've given her some medication to help with the pain and swelling. She's a tough little girl." Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Can I see her?" "Of course. She's asking for you." Sarah followed the doctor into the treatment room, where Lily was lying on a hospital bed, her eyes covered with a cool compress. She looked so small and fragile, and it broke Sarah's heart all over again. "Mommy," Lily's voice was soft, trembling. "I'm here, sweetheart," Sarah said, rushing to her side and taking her hand. "You're going to be okay. The doctor said you're very brave." Lily managed a small smile. "I didn't like it, Mommy. It hurt so much." Sarah's throat tightened. "I know, baby. I'm so sorry. But I promise, I'm going to make sure nothing like this ever happens to you again." As Sarah sat by Lily's side, her phone buzzed incessantly. She ignored it at first, but when it became clear the notifications weren't going to stop, she finally glanced at the screen. Her heart skipped a beat. The incident at the park had been recorded. A neighbor, a young mother who had been at the park with her toddler, had filmed the entire confrontation on her phone. The video had already been uploaded to social media, and it was spreading like wildfire. The hashtag Justice for Lily was trending on Twitter, and the comments were pouring in by the thousands. How could someone do this to a child? Karen needs to be held accountable. This is beyond disgusting. That poor little girl. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through the messages. She felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that people were outraged, anger that it had come to this, and fear of what might happen next. By the time Sarah and Lily returned home the next day, the story had made national news. News vans were parked outside their house, and reporters were camped on the sidewalk, eager for a statement. Sarah ignored them, focusing on getting Lily settled inside. But the fallout was just beginning. Karen's life was unraveling at breakneck speed. The video of her pepper-spraying Lily had gone viral, and the backlash was swift and merciless. Her employer, a prestigious insurance company where she worked as a claims adjuster, issued a public statement condemning her actions and announcing her immediate termination. "We do not condone violence or discrimination of any kind. The actions of this individual do not reflect the values of our company." Karen's husband, a high-profile attorney, filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. In a leaked statement to the press, he said, "I cannot stand by someone who would harm a child in such a cruel and senseless way." Even the HOA, which had once backed Karen's strict enforcement of the rules, distanced themselves from her. The board issued a public apology to Sarah and Lily, promising to review their policies to ensure they were inclusive and accommodating to residents with disabilities. "We deeply regret the pain this incident has caused. We are committed to making meaningful changes to prevent anything like this from happening again." But the most shocking development came when a local news outlet uncovered Karen's past. It turned out she had a history of aggressive behavior and had been involved in several disputes with neighbors over the years. One former neighbor came forward, revealing that Karen had once called the police on a family for having a too colorful garden. "She's always been like this," the neighbor said in an interview. "She thinks she's above everyone else, and she'll do whatever it takes to get her way." As the days passed, the pressure on Karen became unbearable. She was charged with assault and faced the possibility of jail time. Her lawyer advised her to stay out of the public eye, but Karen couldn't resist defending herself. In a now infamous interview, she tearfully claimed she had never meant to hurt anyone, and that she was just trying to enforce the rules. The public wasn't buying it. Meanwhile, Sarah found herself at the center of a growing movement. Disability rights activists reached out to offer their support, and a GoFundMe campaign set up to cover Lily's medical expenses quickly surpassed its goal. Strangers from across the country sent cards and gifts to Lily, along with messages of love and encouragement. One evening, as Sarah tucked Lily into bed, her daughter looked up at her with a serious expression. "Mommy, why did that lady hurt me?" Sarah's heart ached at the question. She knelt beside the bed, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "She was wrong, sweetheart. What she did was very wrong. But you know what? There are so many people who love you and want to make sure you're safe and happy. And Mommy's going to make sure nothing like that ever happens to you again." Lily nodded, her eyes heavy with sleep. "I love you, Mommy. I love you too, Lily. More than anything." As Sarah watched her daughter drift off to sleep, she felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she knew she had to keep fighting. Not just for Lily, but for all the children like her who deserve to live in a world that treated them with kindness and respect. And as for Karen, her life was in shambles. The woman who had once ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist was now a pariah, her reputation destroyed and her future uncertain. Instant karma, indeed. The courtroom was tense as the trial of Karen Whitaker reached its climax. Every seat was filled. Reporters, activists, neighbors, and curious onlookers all waited with bated breath to see how the case would conclude. Sarah sat in the front row, her hands clasped tightly together, her heart pounding in her chest. Beside her was Lily, dressed in a soft pink dress, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny. The little girl had been nervous about coming to the courthouse, but Sarah had reassured her that they would face this together. Karen, once the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood, now looked like a shadow of her former self. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and her face was pale and drawn. She sat at the defendant's table, her eyes downcast, avoiding the stares of the people around her. The prosecutor, a sharp and determined woman named Emily Carter, stood to address the judge. "Your Honor, the defendant, Karen Whitaker, committed an act of violence that is not only shocking but deeply cruel. She pepper-sprayed an 8-year-old child in a wheelchair, a child who was simply trying to enjoy a day at the park with her mother. This was not just an assault. It was a hateful, discriminatory act that has caused lasting trauma to both the child and her family." Sarah's chest tightened as Emily played the video of the incident. Seeing it again, even on a screen, felt like reliving the nightmare. She reached over and took Lily's hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Karen's defense attorney, a man in his 50s with a weary expression, stood next. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets her actions. She was under a great deal of stress and made a terrible mistake. She never intended to harm the child and is willing to accept responsibility for her actions." The judge, a stern-faced woman known for her no-nonsense approach, listened carefully to both sides. When it was time for her to deliver the verdict, the courtroom fell silent. "Karen Whitaker," the judge began, her voice firm and unwavering, "your actions were not just a mistake. They were a deliberate and cruel act of violence against a vulnerable child. You abused your position of power within the HOA to intimidate and harass a family who was simply trying to make their home accessible for their disabled daughter. Your behavior was unacceptable, and it is my duty to ensure that justice is served." Karen's shoulders slumped as the judge continued. "You are hereby sentenced to 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service at a center for children with disabilities, and mandatory anger management classes. You are also ordered to pay $10,000 in restitution to the Thompson family to cover medical expenses and emotional damages." The courtroom erupted in murmurs, but Sarah felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't the harshest punishment, but it was a step toward accountability. As they left the courthouse, Sarah and Lily were surrounded by reporters. "Ms. Thompson, how do you feel about the verdict?" Sarah paused, holding Lily close. "I'm grateful that the judge recognized the seriousness of what happened. This isn't just about my daughter. It's about sending a message that discrimination and violence against people with disabilities will not be tolerated." Lily, emboldened by her mother's strength, looked up at the cameras. "I'm okay now," she said softly, "but I don't want anyone else to get hurt like I did." Her words, simple yet powerful, brought tears to the eyes of many who heard them. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new normal for Sarah and Lily. But the most significant change came in the form of a new law. Inspired by Lily's story, a state legislator introduced Lily's Law, which mandated that all HOAs and public spaces prioritize accessibility for people with disabilities. The bill passed with overwhelming support, and Sarah was invited to the signing ceremony. As she stood beside the governor, holding Lily's hand, Sarah felt a sense of pride she hadn't known was possible. "This law is a testament to the courage of one little girl and her mother," the governor said, smiling down at Lily. "It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to create a world that is inclusive and compassionate." The crowd erupted in applause, and Lily beamed, her face lighting up with joy. Back at home, Sarah and Lily celebrated with a small party. Friends, neighbors, and even some of the activists who had supported them gathered to share stories and laughter. It was a stark contrast to the isolation they had felt when they first moved to Willow Creek. As the sun set, Sarah sat on the porch with Lily, watching the fireflies dance in the twilight. "Mommy," Lily said, her voice thoughtful, "do you think the lady is sorry?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I think she's starting to understand how much pain she caused, and I hope she uses this chance to become a better person." Lily nodded, her expression serious. "I hope so too, because being mean doesn't make anyone happy." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with love for her daughter. "You're so wise, Lily. I'm so proud of you." As they sat there, surrounded by the warmth of their new community, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in a long time. The road ahead would still have its challenges, but she knew they could face them together. And as for Karen, her life continued to unravel. Shunned by her former friends and struggling to rebuild her reputation, she began volunteering at a center for children with disabilities as part of her community service. It was there, surrounded by children who faced challenges far greater than her own, that she began to understand the impact of her actions. One day, as she helped a little boy paint a picture, he looked up at her with a smile. "Thank you, Miss Karen," he said. For the first time in a long time, Karen felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find a way to make amends. But for Sarah and Lily, the past was behind them. They had faced the storm and emerged stronger, their bond unbreakable. And as they looked toward the future, they knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them with courage, love, and the unwavering belief that kindness could change the world. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. See you in the next one.